Hey everyone, happy Friday, it's inkytiger here, and I'm here for that follow-up video talking about motivation. I took a long hard look at my art style over the past week or so, and I've been doing a ton of drawing in my spare time, and trying to figure out who and what has really had an impact on my life as an artist over the years. I would say that it started to really occur to me in high school that you could actually do animation work as a job. Like it was an actual possibility and a possible thing that could be done. And back in high school, I was actually already working on comics pretty seriously. I want to say I started that sophomore year. Because before that I was making comics here and there, but they weren't very long. They were never really finished. They were never more than like a couple pages at a time, honestly. But then, thanks to a collaborative project between a ton of friends, we all basically made a bunch of original characters and told different stories that varied from author and artist to author and artist. And I ended up actually, I don't know why I started like in the middle of the story, and I don't know how, but I actually managed to make like a 77-page comic, I think. It's kind of that ballpark range, but I actually completed a project and I completed a comic, and I was like, wow, this is kind of a fun thing to do. Wonder if it's a realistic job. For some reason, my high school brain came to the conclusion that no, it's not a real job being a comic artist, and trying to be an animator would be a lot more realistic. I know. I think what brought me to that weird conclusion was that, yeah, I was a junior in high school when How to Train Your Dragon came out. That was life-changing for me. It's what got me into animation in the first place. I was like, oh my god, actual people made this movie. They did that for a job. But more than that, I don't want to say it was the first, but it felt like, honestly, the first story where I honestly felt a huge connection to the character, and I felt like someone had finally seen my story and understood, and they were sharing their own version of a similar story, but through animation and art. So that honestly had a huge impact on me, and I think it kind of changed me as an artist forever, and it made me actually start to take it very seriously. For the time when it came out, and honestly, it still holds up pretty well to today's animation standards, the graphics were gorgeous. The special thing about storytelling through comics and animation is that expressions can actually be exaggerated way beyond what the human face is capable of. And the way I see that is you can take a character, take the emotion that they're feeling, and rather than just have them feel it internally, you can show it on their face through expressive animation. Seeing such a relatable story that was so expressive and emotional, I guess emotions are kind of what connects to your lizard brain, so I guess that's probably why it's so relatable for a lot of people. Emotions are universal! But seeing all that come together, I think that's when it really hit me that this is an option for me. This is a thing I can do in the future, is not just make comic books in high school for my friends to read and pass around during class, but I can actually tell these stories and it could have a really good impact on people. Hopefully, if it's done right, other people will feel that sense of being understood and feel that sense of belonging and not being alone. And that is so important for human beings. So that was the first really big inspiration source for me, and I would say that's definitely what motivated me to actively pursue art and not just do it as kind of a fun thing. Fun story for another day. When I was a kid, I was like, art isn't a real job. Again, I know. I've learned a lot since then. So what are some other inspirations that I drew from since How to Train Your Dragon? This isn't quite since so much as prior to. I think that's probably what got me into drawing, actually. Was when Avatar: The Last Airbender came out. I really fell in love with the artistic style, as well as the story. The story was really good, but as a kid, kind of flew over my head, to be honest, with all the pretty magical effects. And I mean, when you're 10 years old, you know. What even is plot development, you know? That style that Brian Konietzko and Michael DiMartino came up with really appealed to me, so I started copying that. that Avatar The Last Airbender design feel to my stuff. And then when Legend of Korra came along, that was another really big influence, especially as I started to grow as an artist and I needed to draw people that didn't just look 10 years old. And that's when I started taking cues from other artists and designers like Joaquim Dos Santos and Lauren Montgomery. I think that what I like most about those four artists is just how well they can show expression. It's like a double-edged sword with animation, because either people seem to get like really overexpressive and like show all the emotion, and it's almost over the top, but it works well because of reality fallacy, I would argue. Should probably define that. But on the same hand, since animated figures are not in fact people, sometimes expressions can be kind of hard to pull off and manage and make seem authentic, I guess. Bryke and Joaquim and Lauren, all four of them have really incredible expression in their animation. And so I think that was a really big influence on my art. When I was kind of searching and looking back at all of the artists that had a really big impact on my art, I noticed this weird pattern where most of them are Canadian. I don't know how that happened, but apparently all the storyboard artists and comic book artists are all from Canada. I guess I have to move to Toronto. I think in my last video I mentioned Joanne Matt. Her art is kind of flexible, and I think that comes with the territory as being a storyboard artist, but the stuff I've seen was from Avatar The Last Airbender, Rise of the Guardians, Troll Hunters, and also her comic book Horus, I think it was called. She has that one comic in her background, and then she also did a lot of storyboarding. And again, I think one of her strongest traits is expression. Whether it's the big, goofy Sokka grin to Zuko wondering why he's so bad at being good, you know? It's just a huge spectrum of emotions, and they're all very expressive in a way that only animation can really provide, I guess. Then there were a ton of comic book artists. I don't know if they count as indie, but I guess these are indie in the sense that they're not part of the big two, so they're not part of Marvel or DC. And if I look at it that way, I think all of them except for one are from Canada, so good job, Canada. You guys have great art and storytelling, apparently. I think she's best known for Saga and Archie, probably. I haven't read the Archie series, though, so I couldn't tell you. But I love the style of Fiona Staples. Again, it's those expressions. She's got it down. I think it's she's got a great way of showing expression without making it look fake or unnatural. All of her art looks really realistic somehow, and it doesn't have a lot of the thick line weight that a lot of other comics do. And I think I actually enjoy that a bit more because of my animation background, so I'm more familiar with that from, you know, Legend of Korra, Avatar The Last Airbender. So seeing that style and seeing kind of, it almost has a sketchy quality to some of the panels. That's definitely had a big impact on my art. I wouldn't say that I've successfully learned from like the anatomy or anything, but it's definitely helped me improve. The rest of these artists are a lot less realistic, but I feel like stylistically they've all had influences on me at some point or another. So another one of my favorite artists is Faith Erin Hicks. She wrote and illustrated Nothing Can Possibly Go Wrong and Friends with Boys and The Adventures of Superhero Girl, I think. She has this interesting style where it's kind of, I want to say it's like Brian Lee O'Malley created characters that were a little taller and a little less chibi-ish, a little more proportional. But she still has those gigantic eyes with the big dark pupils, and for the longest time that was how I drew eyes in my animation comics. I still do it, honestly, sometimes. If you see big old eyes with like a completely filled in dark iris and pupil, probably because I got that from Faith Erin Hicks. The next artist, she had a really similar style. I would say her style was similar to Faith Erin Hicks, but probably with a little more variation in line weight, and I think it had a bit less of a sketchy quality to it. But she's only got one book out so far as I know, and her name is Vera Brosgol, but she did Anya's Ghost, which is actually pretty well known, I think. The story's kind of a bummer sometimes, but I thought it was funny, and I really liked the style. I don't know if it's like the characters stylistically so much as the sketchy quality, I guess, and maybe like the varying characters, like how different they are. But Jillian Tamaki also has had a really big impact on my work. She did This One Summer and Super Mutant Magic Academy, which, if you haven't read them, This One Summer is a really sweet, thought-provoking book, and Super Mutant Magic Academy is exactly as funny as it sounds. And then it also has a lot of... It goes between absurd to deeply philosophical and then everything in between. It's really good. I totally recommend it. Back in the day, she had a username, Strangely Katie, but now I think she's going by Katie O'Neill. And she did this really cool, honestly, like, it was pioneering at the time, but she did this comic called Princess, and that had really good, it had some really good character design and really nice line work, and it was almost like an illustrator version of anything done by Noelle Stevenson. Like, her stuff was like clean, colorful, and very design oriented for the characters. This connection probably won't make as much sense as the others because it's not really visible on the surface in my opinion, but Emily Carroll is a comic artist that has also had a really big influence on my work. I think she released His Face All Red first, and I want to say that was just a webcomic, but then she went on to put together a sort of compilation of her horror comics in a book called Through the Woods. And I want to say that maybe not so much her character design, but her overall comic book aesthetic, I would say that had a really big influence on my art, just with this sort of splashy, painterly quality to the really stark whites and blacks. Really sparing use of color, so maybe it'd be black, white, and red for one comic, and then for another it would be black, white, yellow, and blue. So that kind of stylization has definitely impacted my art, whether it is in comics or whether it's just like a digital painting. And I think the best thing about all of these artists is that they all had to put in a ton of work to get into where they are right now. To me, that is probably the most inspiring thing, because they started out just like you and me, trying to kind of make their way doing this thing they love, working it around other jobs and just trying to make rent and still do this thing. And they made it. Like, they published books, they're working on shows. To me, that's probably the most inspiring thing, like, beyond any art that they could ever do. So then what's inspiring my work right now? First and foremost, friends. Having friends who are artists and writers is great motivation. It can be hard to show your personal works to friends and family members, but honestly, the critique is so important that it's worth it, you know, and whether they have good or bad things to say doesn't matter, because it's going to help make your project better. I mean, if they're artists and writers too, that's great because they understand where you're coming from, but if they're not, it doesn't matter because you still have a relatively objective eye taking a look at your project, and that can only help you improve. And they've been inspiring me because they're all working on their own projects, And they're not giving up even between their 2 part-time jobs and commutes and things. So seeing that is really motivating. If not for the only reason of, I can't let them get there first, kind of a thing. I've been doing a lot of reading on stories and essays that deal with trauma and recovery with humor and friendship, and that's really been having a direct impact on the project that I'm currently working on, just because it's relevant, but it also keeps me motivated because it reminds me that there are other people with a similar experience that could benefit from another story out in the world. Lots and lots of orchestral music has been a source of inspiration for me lately. If you haven't listened to it while you're drawing, it's actually really helpful in the sense that you can kind of picture sort of a movie playing in your head, if you will. That's just a thing that helps me. It helps you come up with a story to draw. So another source of inspiration for me has been this series of journals that I've kept over the last 2 years. Yeah, there's like 6 or 7 journals that cover all the events in that time, and it's a lot of material to draw from. So it's inspiration doesn't feel like the right word, but it's a lot to work with. So I guess inspiration? I don't know. It's certainly keeping me motivated and working. But yeah, actually looking at all the artists and all the works that have inspired me in the past, and who's inspiring me right now, taking a look at that and at what got me into art in the first place, that made me realize and remind me of why I'm doing this. That deep dive helped remind me that I want to tell stories, so I can recreate that feeling that I got so long ago of being understood. But I want to share that with others. So I want to let people know that whatever they're going through, they're not alone. Someone, somewhere, has faced it too, and they made it through okay, and they know just how you feel. And the cool thing about that is you might never meet that person, but you know, on the opposite end of the world, they understand. I think that's something really special that only stories can do. Keeping that in the foreground of my mind, I'm going to keep working on my stuff. I hope maybe that kind of gives you a little bit of inspiration, kind of lights a fire under you to work on your own projects. I would love to see any progress that you've been making, so if you want to share any photos or videos, just tag me on Instagram or send me a message on Facebook. I would love to look at it and even share it on video if you like. But yeah, send pictures of what you're working on or videos that are updating everyone on your projects. I'd love to see it. And I'm gonna keep creating too. So hope you guys have a good weekend.